It's been a rough couple of years for movie theaters. Streaming services had already taken a bite out of profits before the pandemic, and things certainly got exponentially worse in 2020. Nearly all theaters shut down, some permanently. Those that were able to reopen were forced to adopt draconian safety measures in the name of public safety. In my state of Washington, the lockdowns have been so bad that I haven't been able to step foot into a movie theater for well over a year. My first foray back into the cinema was for John Krasinski's sequel to his 2018 sleeper hit, A Quiet Place. That movie was made on a shoestring budget and came out of nowhere to make a boatload of money and subsequently received the green light for a sequel. It also proved that Krasinski was capable of stepping behind the camera after spending his entire career cracking jokes in front of it. So, is A Quiet Place Part 2 a capable horror sequel, or does it fall victim to the sophomore slump? Let's find out. Thank you so much for checking out the review. Before we get started, click on that red subscribe button and the notification bell. That way you know whenever I post a new piece of content. I will do my best not to lay out any major spoilers for this movie, but I will be spoiling the first one. A Quiet Place Part 2 certainly has its work cut out for it. It begins on day one of the alien invasion with a meteor crash landing outside of a small New England town. Said meteor immediately unleashes the four-legged alien creatures, which then do what aliens do and lay waste to whatever lives and breathes within their vicinity. It's a nice little bit of world building, and it essentially explains much of what was left out of part 1. In addition to that, it also introduces us to the mysterious Emmett, played by Cillian Murphy, who will become a central part of the story in the present. After what proves to be a fantastic reintroduction to the Abbott family, the film picks up in the current day and directly after the ending of the first film. And when I say directly after the ending of the first film, I mean exactly that. It's a decision that mostly works well despite the fact that the actors who play the Abbott children have clearly aged a lot. This next part is going to be a little spoilery, so fast forward like 30 seconds if you don't want to hear it. The ending of this movie is nearly a carbon copy of part 1's ending. It actually made me uncomfortable to see how straight up lazy the storytelling became in what is otherwise an extremely great movie. It's also one of the most obvious examples of teeing yourself up for the inevitable sequel that I was genuinely confused to see that this is what they came up with. Both of these movies are really great, but they have literally the same ending, and it makes them feel like a TV miniseries that has no idea where it's actually going. That's not my only criticism of this, because A Quiet Place Part 2 has some of the most baffling character decisions I've seen in any movie, let alone an entry in the horror genre, a genre that almost exclusively exists because it's filled with characters that make boneheaded decisions. Along those same lines are a staggering number of plot holes. Here's some examples. The story introduces a new weakness for the aliens, but it's going to end up causing massive headaches in writing the sequel. Trust me, it's going to force otherwise smart characters to make dumb decisions, so don't say I didn't warn you. This also suffers from the same massive plot hole that permeates part 1. These aliens have super powerful hearing. It is not only their most notable feature, it's obviously their biggest weakness. Government of the United States has sonic weaponry and could easily end the alien menace in a matter of weeks. Instead, a little girl has to keep shoving her broken hearing aid into a microphone so a grown-up can shotgun ET back to hell where he belongs. I get it. We're living in a post-apocalyptic world, but did nobody in the entire country think about using sonic weapons against a creature whose entire head is made up of a mouth surrounded by an ear? The hearing part of my ear is like, what, this big? And I have really good hearing. Can you imagine how painful it would be if my ear was the size of a freaking basketball and you pummeled it with high-frequency sound waves? Probably very painful. Krasinski has spoken about how he wanted part 1 to be a solo film, while at the same time, Paramount was accepting scripts and then rejecting them because they were too focused on making A Quiet Place into a franchise. Looking at these two films now, the notion is laughable because the ending of A Quiet Place obviously tees up the audience for a sequel, and the ending of A Quiet Place Part 2 obviously tease up the audience for another sequel. Now that I've spent a lot of time dunking on this movie, it certainly has many qualities that make it enjoyable. There are a fair number of decent jump scares, it looks great, and the performances are fantastic all around. Krasinski's wife Emily Blunt returns as Evelyn, the matriarch and sole surviving parent of the Abbott family. She isn't some beefy action hero, she's a loving mother doing her best to keep her kids safe at all costs. It's an extension of her role in the first film, and while Blunt does a great job, it doesn't offer much in the way of character growth. This is a bit of an issue with the entire small cast, with one major exception. Cillian Murphy's Emmett is the most intriguing new character and the only one who seems to have anything resembling a character arc. The ambiguous stranger is hands down the best thing about A Quiet Place Part 2. The direction by Krasinski is just as good as Part 1, and he's established a very unique visual style that's well suited for horror movies. This one also has relatively little dialogue, and the sound design is fantastic. Based on what I've said so far, you probably guessed that I dislike this movie. I didn't hate it, but I also think that it feels like the second act of a 3-act play. It's well crafted, scary, intense, and exciting, but it also completely butchers its predictable ending in the least interesting way possible. Maybe the third film will wrap things up in an incredibly satisfactory way, but as it stands now, A Quiet Place Part 2 is a capable sequel to a beloved original horror movie. It's not a masterpiece, and it doesn't really add all that much new to the genre, but it's just enjoyable enough. Thank you so much for watching. If you found my review helpful, please consider subscribing. You can also like and share the video since that tells YouTube my channel is worth promoting. Sound off down in the comments, hit me up, let me know what you think of A Quiet Place Part 2, and I'll see you next Wednesday at 9 a.m.